Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose the religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Today I have an interview that I did with Sydney. At the end of the interview, I left in a part where I invite her to a local Apostafest, Fest. And I actually got to meet Sydney for the first time at the Midwest Apostafest Fest near Indianapolis at the beginning of August. So it was really cool to get to meet somebody before I even got to release their episode. And she got to meet a number of other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses at this event. So I've been able to meet her in person and through this interview, and now you have a chance to meet her as well. Be sure to stick around after the interview. I have something new and what I think is pretty cool that I'm going to announce that I think you'll like. So let's go ahead and meet Sydney.
I am Sydney Marshall. I'm 28. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
Alrighty. So then how was it that you came to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
Well, I would say technically I was born into it because my father's parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, and he was a Jehovah's Witness, but my mother, her and my dad dated when they were real young, and they got married real young, and even though she grew up in like a strong Christian background, she ended up converting to being a Jehovah's Witness when they were married. And the funny thing about it is my mom was baptized and my dad wasn't baptized. But my dad's dad was an elder and he married them. I don't know if he was an elder at the time. Yeah. I don't know if he was an elder at the time that he married them. But they got married pretty young. I think my mom was like 17 maybe. And then they had me when she was 20. So she was a witness for a few years before they had me, and he still wasn't baptized. But yeah, I would say I was pretty much born into it, even though my dad wasn't excuse me, he wasn't super regular, obviously. But my mom was. And then when she got disfellowshipped, I was like 3 or 4 when they got divorced. So from like that point on, it was a split between a Jehovah's Witness household and a Christian household.
Gotcha. So then your mom was disfellowshipped. You said you had a split between a Christian and a Jehovah's Witness household. So I'm assuming then your mom stayed with the Jehovah's Witness religion.
No, it was actually my dad that stayed. Because like I said, his whole family he has 8 brothers and sisters, and they're all, they're not all like baptized, but they were all raised that way. So my dad's side of the family, they're all still Jehovah's Witnesses. My mom actually, when she got disfellowshipped, she never really went back or never really tried because she actually got remarried.
Okay.
And my stepdad was not a Jehovah's Witness at all. And I think she had a really hard time with how she was disfellowshipped. It really put a bad taste in her mouth because, and this is just like hearsay within my family, people will admit to things or won't admit to things, but apparently my dad had cheated on my mom with my aunt, her sister, and then because he wasn't baptized, he didn't necessarily get in trouble for it, and the elders kept encouraging my mom to work it out with him, and she was obviously not wanting to do that, she tried for a little bit, but then she ended up wanting to be just free of it. And I think that's why her first relationship outside of my dad was really rushed, because she didn't really have anywhere to go.
Sure.
She kind of estranged herself from the family, and this guy that she ended up marrying after my dad was like her biggest support, I guess, because he was friends with both my mom and my dad, and it's a whole thing. But anyway, she didn't like the fact that he didn't get in trouble, and then she got disfellowshipped because of divorcing my dad, and they didn't even like have a formal meeting for her. They just disfellowshipped her over the phone.
Whoa.
They didn't even give her the time of day
I thought
to
you were
like
supposed to be given a chance to, prove your repentance or not.
yeah, I know. But I think because she moved in with another man, they were just like, oh, well, she's just not even
Yeah.
worth, investigating what happened. And she's the one who's baptized. So she's going to be the one who's going to be punished for it, kind of thing.
Or that magical baptism. If you can avoid that, you can skate on a lot of things. But
No
once
kidding.
you get baptized, you'll get in trouble for all kinds of things that a person who doesn't get baptized can seem to skate on, even though, I mean, like you said, your dad was around the organization much longer than she was.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And too, what's super sad, that you say that as far as you get baptized and then it's like, the whole world is put on your shoulders and all
Yeah.
this responsibility. And my stepmom and we got baptized together. And to this day, I mean, now we're definitely not talking. We don't have really a relationship anymore, but for a long time after I had left and was disfellowshipped, she would just say to me, man, I wish you hadn't got baptized. Things would be so much easier. I could talk to you and not feel this way. And I'm thinking, from like a Christian standpoint, I think, well, that's like one of the most horrible things you could say to a person. Like, I wish you hadn't dedicated your life to Jesus and made it possible to be with him after death
Right.
because I want to talk to you.
Right.
Like, it's so selfish. Like, even if you're whatever, like I'm not anything anymore. I'm not Christian. I'm not anything. I don't go to a church and, I don't even know what I believe anymore just because I was so like messed up that way. But
Sure.
I just was so upset that she would always say that because it's like that is such a cop out for you because
Yes.
yeah, you can have a relationship with my sister and with my brother because they're not baptized and they don't go, but yet they smoke weed and they do all these things that I don't even do. And yet I'm being punished because I didn't want to be a witness anymore and whatever. I just think the whole thing is just messed up.
Oh no, it absolutely is messed up in every way. And I like what you said there about the way she treated your baptism and said that she almost wish you hadn't been baptized. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't looked at it from that angle before. Um, so you know when you were a kid, um, obviously now like you said you were kind of living between this Jehovah's Witness household and this kind of more just Christian household. Um, how did that impact you as a kid? Um, as far as the worldview that you had because you were kind of torn between the two.
Yeah, it was not easy. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who, they're forced to do it and they don't really have another choice. So I felt that I was blessed to have an outlet through my mom and her family when it came to that as a child. But my mom suffered from a lot of issues, obviously, after leaving that and going through the trauma that she did. And as a kid, being with her was hard too because she suffered from a lot of mental issues. I mean, she wasn't like crazy or anything, but she just was a very impulsive person and she worked a lot of jobs because she was like a single mom. Um, and because of like her strong Christian background, she felt the need to marry a man instead of just dating them. She felt like if she was sleeping with another person, that it was, she was going to go to hell for it. So she would marry these men that she would date instead of just dating them, So there was a lot of turmoil with my mom. And so I would go be babysat by like two of my aunts and my grandmother. And so, like I said, I was really close to all of them and they were kind of a reprieve for me. But at the same time, there were a lot of good qualities about my dad and my stepmom when I would go there because they weren't really regular when I was a kid. Like we would go on the Sundays that I would be with them because they had every other weekend custody type of arrangement. And so like I would go on Sundays with them, and it was fine other than like I would get spanked a lot and taken back to the bathroom a lot because I didn't really know how to sit still, like it's different than Sunday school or just not going to church at all,
Well, yeah, you're expecting a small child to sit for 2 hours in a boring environment and not move.
Right.
That's a lot to expect from a kid.
Well, and I think too, there were other children around my age at the Kingdom Hall that we went to, but I didn't really click with them because I came from also my mother's side of the family they're very Christian. They're very, they go to church, and my one aunt was like really big in her church, and my other aunt, she doesn't like necessarily go to church, but she's a very strong believer. And so they would always be teaching me about God and how you should be and how you should treat other people. And I thought, well, this is cool because I see that they're doing that and they're saying that. And then I would go to my dad's, and they would go to the Kingdom Hall, and they would be like, well, we need to do this, 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 and this. And then like, a week later, when we didn't go to the meeting, they just did whatever they wanted whenever they wanted. And they only used like excuses that the witnesses, they would use teaching tools at times that they wanted to teach you, but then they never did it themselves, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that continued on into my teenage years. So
that's interesting because that's the opposite of what, as a young witness, we're taught. I remember being taught, that essentially we as witnesses, we talk the talk and walk the walk.
Right.
But that, these other Christian religions, they were just these things that, these people put on Sunday, and then they took off as soon as they left church, and they just went and did whatever they wanted. And then they came back Sunday and put that personality back on, and were suddenly, their church personality. But, as this podcast has shown through a lot of the stories, when you start getting into what's behind the scenes, a lot of what was taught at the Kingdom Hall and a lot of what the brothers and sisters professed to believe is not what they acted out in their home life.
Absolutely.
It was very different. So what was your childhood like at home? I guess from the witness perspective, what was it like when you were with that side of the family?
Well, what's funny is my stepmom, she would, I guess, say this to me a lot as a kid, but as an adult, she has mentioned it more than a handful of times. She would say, I always felt bad for you because you just seem like a very depressed and sad kid. And I would say, like, I didn't say anything really because I didn't really know what to say to that, because in my mind, I was thinking I was a happy kid. Like, I think the most depressing part of my childhood, I don't want to hurt their feelings in saying this, but I felt like maybe I was sad because I was with them. I felt more myself and happy when I was with my mom's family than I was with them. And then I think that, because as a young kid, like I said, we only went once in a while. And my stepmom was not baptized, even though she was like an avid Jehovah's Witness, and all her family were Jehovah's Witness, like her mom and her sisters and stuff like that. So things didn't really pick up into being real serious until I was about 13. And before that, I was able to go to school and have school friends come over and play in sports and do all sorts of stuff because, like I said, it was like a once in a while thing.
Yeah.
And then when I was 13, go back a couple years, and when I was 10, my parents, my stepmom and my dad had my little brother. And then they kind of used that as a manipulative tool to try and get me to want to live with them. So when I was 12, the custody arrangement changed between my parents, and my mom signed papers before she really read them. And mind you, my dad is, there's a lot of good qualities about my dad, but my dad is a bully. And I think just the trauma that my mom has had in the past with him, and his intense, severe hatred for my mother, he bullied her into signing all custody to him. And my mom, I don't think, really realized what she was signing. And so I only visited her like every other weekend. And then now I'm living with my dad, and they had full control over everything I did. And
Wow,
and then
that's
my mom, I think that really started that. I mean, that messed her up too.
yeah.
And she didn't really know what to do after that because, she only had me. And she was in, at the time, abusive relationship with a man that I don't remember if he ever laid a hand on her, but he was extremely verbally, mentally abusive, and like controlled all the money and everything. So my mom was like in a really bad place.
Well,
So
I mean, that's got to be hard for you too. Being um, so young, and suddenly not only has the chain of custody changed, in that now you're with your dad more, but also you're in this totally different environment more. Your
yeah.
life had to change a lot.
Well, yeah, for sure. Because too, my dad, he's a contractor, so he works all the time. My stepmom was a nurse; she was an RN, so she worked all the time, and we ran a horse farm. So for me, it was like, and for my sister too, especially because she's 7 years older than me. She's my stepsister, but we had a lot of horse chores, we had a lot of house chores, we had a lot of things we had to do because both our parents worked full time. My dad was like 80 hours a week, maybe. And my stepmom, she would have a lot of overtime and on call. And, so my sister and I, it was like clean the house, make the food, do the barn chores. You need to get good grades in school. And so we had a lot of pressure on us as kids to do. We had a lot of work we had to do. And I didn't have to do that at my mom's. Like, yeah, I had to do my homework and stuff, but we lived in a small house and there really wasn't much to clean. And she liked to sit down and play card games with me, and, board games and dice games. And we just spent time together. So,
Sounds almost
yeah.
like you got a job.
Oh, it was. Actually, when I was a teenager, I got upset because I don't like horses. I don't like riding horses. It really hurt my hips and knees. And I'm like, I'm doing all these chores. Like, y'all got to give me some sort of compensation for doing these chores. Like, I know I'm your kid, but I want nothing to do with this. And so I convinced them to pay me $8 an hour to do it. So,
So
but
it sounds like home was pretty, busy.
it's so busy.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of no wonder you didn't go to meetings super regularly and such, because how would you find time?
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest part of it. And I think Penny, excuse me, my stepmom, she I think she used that as an excuse. Like, I am tired. I'm not going to let somebody bully me into going to a meeting when I've worked this many hours in a week. Like, I think she felt like that's my religion. Don't make me feel bad for not going. It's not like I'm a non-believer. I just worked really hard this week. So mind your own business kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when I was 13, it was only obviously a year after living with my dad, my mom kind of had a total mental breakdown at one point, and her and I got to a really big fight, and I stopped going over and seeing her on my own because I couldn't deal with that with her. And then that was the pushing point where my stepmom was like, you need to study with somebody. I think you need something in your life. You can't just not have this. I think you will, it'll make you happy. It'll get you, out of this depression. It'll get you whatever. And
Yeah.
besides that, you need to study.
Yeah, it's like, here, you know what you need? You need an escape. You need to escape into this thing here and forget your problems.
Exactly.
Which is what it ends up being for a lot of people.
Well, and I think too, because my mom was disfellowshipped and really didn't have a whole lot of interest at the time of being a Jehovah's Witness anymore,
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot easier for them to be like, but look at, now you're a Jehovah's Witness and your mom is disfellowshipped. You can't talk to her because she's disfellowshipped.
Oh, wow.
You know, it was, I think that was a
Oh,
part of
I didn't even think about that. That's pretty manipulative.
yeah. And then my mom, being who she is, she wants to be Christian. She struggles a lot with religion because she desperately wants to be in a relationship with God and have all of that. But because of how messed up she became after being a Jehovah's Witness, it's been, I mean, she's in her late 40s and it's still really hard for her. She still doesn't really have a place she feels like she can call home when it comes to a religion. So for her, she was I think glad that I was studying to be a witness, because she's like, oh, well, what if it is the truth?
Right.
You know, there's still that in the back of your mind if you haven't gotten to that point where you know it's not. You know, so she's like, well, what if it is? I'm glad my daughter's studying, and maybe I should try go back to the Kingdom Hall and get reinstated, and we can do it together. You know, she immediately was like, oh, we can do this together. You can be baptized and I can be reinstated, and then we'll be really close. You
No
know, my mom
pressure.
was really, yeah.
Oh, that's
And,
tough.
yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of coming from both sides, but in the end, my mom was just like, she just tried to be like, okay, well, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I'm just going to let you do your own thing, and hopefully one day we can reconcile something, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Let me ask you, so in like in school, did you have to change a lot? You know, a lot of witness kids have trouble in school. You know, it's hard to have to not stand for the flag salute, not do any of the holidays and such. You came originally from, I guess, you know, the more dominant Christian family because you were staying with your mom more. Once that changed over, did you have to, you know, go back to school with a new outlook on things and really start changing?
oh my goodness, yes, because that was so hard for me too, because you know, I had one really good friend, because I had switched schools when I moved in with my dad. So I switched schools to the school that I went to until I graduated. And I met a girl, and her and I became really good friends. And to this day, she's my best friend still. And so when I moved in with my dad, and I couldn't celebrate birthdays anymore, I couldn't really do anything like that stuff that they do at school. I didn't necessarily, I guess, protest in the not saluting the flag and stuff until I was studying at the age of 14. But before that, um, like I would lie to my parents and be like, oh yeah, you know, Rachel's just having a party. We're just getting together. It's for the volleyball team, you know, and secretly it was her birthday party. Well, when they found out about that, I was so grounded because it was a birthday party and it wasn't a volleyball party.
Right.
So, yeah, I couldn't, you know, I couldn't do any of that stuff anymore. And then when I started studying, it was just like, well, you know, I'm not even going to stand, let alone salute. And it really didn't feel super awkward until we had a veterans assembly where war veterans came in, and you know, they were doing the flag ceremony, and I was sitting there, and everybody was like really looking at me like, how can you disrespect these men up on stage like that?
Yeah.
I definitely felt really awkward in that situation, but I still sat there because that's what you're supposed to do. So
Yeah, that's tough. It really puts you in a bad situation, and then, you know, having to make that change as a kid. Um, it's just really tough to be pulled in so many directions. Um, what about at the Kingdom Hall? How were you received when you know, went back with your dad? Did they kind of see that maybe as an opportunity to seize upon you a little bit,
Well, see, and it's weird because it totally didn't happen like that. My dad doesn't go to the Kingdom Hall. I mean, now I think he goes more so because of current circumstances, but even then, he would only go to the memorial.
Oh
Like
wow.
he never went to the Kingdom Hall, but my stepmom would go, occasionally to the meetings, and she's like, I think you need to study. So what happened was there's two Kingdom Halls. There's one that was only 20 minutes away, 15, 20 minutes away from where we lived. And then there was another one that was 45 minutes away from where we lived. And we live in a really rural area. So it's like you kind of, there's not a lot of Kingdom Halls to choose from. And at that time, they weren't necessarily really picky about which one you go to just because there wasn't a lot of people,
Yeah.
excuse me, at the halls. So what happened was the one that we went to when I was a kid that was only a couple minutes, 15 minutes away. My stepmom didn't like going there because the women always looked at her and judged her. And, she felt like if her shirt was a little bit too low, she got like rude glances. And my stepmom is very much like, you don't like me, then keep it to yourself, or like, don't look at me that way. She's very much like, I don't know. She doesn't like that kind of judgment. And, so we started going to this other Kingdom Hall, and that's the one that my dad's sister went to. So my aunt found a girl who at the time I think was like maybe 3 or 4 years older than me. And so I was like 14 and she was like 18 or 19, and very sweet girl. I really clicked with her, but she went to this Kingdom Hall that was far away. So that became our new hall. We didn't know anybody there. And we really liked it because there was a lot of people my age. There was a lot of, preteen, teenage, young 20-year-olds. And it was a very active Kingdom Hall as far as there was tons of parties. There were tons of cookouts and tons of get-togethers because I loved volleyball. And because I couldn't play volleyball in high school anymore, I actually found a whole group of people, like 10 or 12 people that love to play volleyball. So all of us at the Kingdom Hall, like after a meeting, like a night meeting, we would go drive 10 minutes up to a volleyball court, an outdoor volleyball court, and play volleyball for hours after the Kingdom Hall, like after the meeting.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That
so it
sounds
was
fun.
actually a really super fun hall to be a part of.
Yeah. That's rare. A lot of us were not blessed with
Yeah,
so many opportunities for association and
yeah.
fun. How'd
So I
you
felt like I
go
had a
ahead?
lot of friends though. Like I think that was a definite draw for me too, because I didn't have a lot of friends in school.
Yeah.
I just had like a handful, like maybe 2 or 3 really good friends in school, but not like, I kind of felt like I was in a popular crowd. Like everybody liked me and wanted me to go to these things because I'm the new girl and I'm doing so good and I'm so like faithful at all the things that I'm doing. And so I guess I felt the love bombing in that way, where they're like, yes, another new young person that we can hang out with and influence. So
Yeah, it's a big deal when a new person comes in and you feel like you have a new opportunity for friends because everyone in the congregation is, especially among the young people, is pretty starved for friends. Um,
yes.
so it's always an exciting time when there's a new face. Um, how did things how did it progress to the point of baptism with you? You know, from the time that you start living with your dad again, up to that point of baptism.
Well, it happens so fast and in such a short amount of time. And I think the biggest push for me with it was the influence of all the young people. And the cool thing at the time, because I had to distance myself from my friends at school, I couldn't play volleyball anymore with them. And as a witness, you were constantly talking about the Bible or talking about something that just happens to relate to what you were talking about, but not really. So people were like distancing themselves from me. And then I got to where I felt uncomfortable talking about it with other people at school because everybody started looking at me like the weird girl who's the witness. So I actually ended up just becoming like a hermit crab, other than the girl that I had studied with at this New Kingdom Hall had a cousin who went to my high school, and she was one grade up from me, and she wanted to study with her cousin. So she would go pick Michelle up, and she would pick me up, and we would go hang out at her house. The girl I studied with, we go hang out at her house. And the girl she studied with had a brother who was my age and went to because our high school was like the regular high school, but then there was an arts school, and he went to the arts school. So technically we would have been in the same school, but he went to the Concord Academy. And anyway, I became super fast friends with him and with Michelle. And so because I had Michelle in high school with me, then it was like I felt better about not having my worldly friends anymore because it was me and Michelle against everyone.
Gotcha.
And actually, Michelle and I and my stepmom all got baptized together. And I think it was just, I was always studying. I went through the What Does the Bible Teach book with the girl I studied with. And then we progressed into where we would just study like the Watchtower and Awake together, and then we would read the Awake together, and then we would do studies from the Theocratic Ministry School book together, and then we would do Tuesday night Bible study. We would study that book, which at the time I think was the Daniel book, so I was just really progressing really fast, and I did all of my extra time that I had outside of all of my home chores that I had. I was hanging out with them. I was going out field service with them. I was really getting close to the entire family. Because the girl I studied with, she had 2 other sisters, and I really liked them too. And I would hang out with them, and I really liked her mom. And we just did a lot of stuff together. And yeah. I got my stepmom to go with me to do a lot of stuff, and she was studying with an older lady at the hall too. And her and the lady she studied with became really close, fast friends. And the lady she studied with, her husband was an elder, so we hung out with them a lot too. And even though my stepmom, she was still in that mindset of like, you're not going to bully me into doing things that I can't physically do because I don't have the time or the strength, because I still work a full-time job and I run a horse business, because we boarded horses also. It wasn't just our horses. At one time we had 18 horses in our barn.
Oh, wow.
So it was a lot. And so like on a day-to-day basis, if we weren't going to the Kingdom Hall, or I couldn't convince my stepmom to go out in service with me or take me out in service or whatever, it was at least during the school year, wake up, go to school, come home, clean the house, get something out prepared for dinner, go down, clean the horse stalls, feed the horses, bring the horses in, and then come back up to the house, cook dinner, or at least check on it to make sure that like everything's cooking just fine. And then I would have time to study for the Kingdom Hall for whatever the next meeting was. And then after that, we would eat dinner. And then if I had like 2 seconds to myself, I would sit down and watch TV with my stepmom. We watched like American Idol or Bachelor or something. And then I had to go to bed. And then it was like, if I had to do any homework, I had to fit it within that time frame, or I had to do it on the bus on the way to school. So I wasn't the best student. I mean, I graduated with a 3.0 GPA, but it was mostly because I took like art and office assistant or library assistant. It wasn't because I was in like, advanced English or something. So
Right. I have to ask you, so just what you're talking about there is something that I like that tone, is something
sorry.
that kind of resonates with me. I've just been thinking about lately, and that is that. So I know myself as an adult, I'm a little bit of a workaholic, and I've just been kind of looking back at my past, growing up in an organization where there was so much to do. You had so much to do, not only with all the study and then, the meetings, the service, um, and then all these horse chores and
Mhm.
just home chores and everything. I'm just curious, do you think that that has impacted you as an adult? Do you think that it has had any impact on how busy you need to be, or do you think, or was it just something you did back then and you were kind of done with it?
No, I because my dad, he's kind of a perfectionist when it would come to the house. Like if
Yeah.
he came home and he saw you sitting on the couch watching TV, he would literally point out seven things that you could be doing instead. And so for me, owning my own home now, of course I'm not that anal retentive, but I do when I'm stressed out, and you can ask anybody that's been in my home more than one time, I compulsively clean when I have stress. And I also, it's not just it's not just like, oh, I'm going to dust this. It's no, I'm going to rearrange my entire house furniture so that I can clean underneath the couch and the bed and my husband, he's just like, he does not get it. He's like, where's whatever he's looking for? It was over here last week and it was over there the week before. And he's just like, I walk into the house and it's like I live in a new house every time he comes home. So I think that's definitely because of how much I had to clean and how almost OCD my dad was about stuff. Because he's actually I think he has ADHD and a lot of perfection like type issues with that, kind of like what you talked about in your own story.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's me.
Yeah, having to have things a certain way, and if other people don't think that way, well, you should just think that way, and that's just how you should do it. And I think I kind of am that way too now because he was that way, not because I'm naturally that way.
Right. Yeah, I was
So
I was just wondering if it made you have kind of a need to stay compulsively busy.
I
um,
mean, I guess I am, but I have channeled that into a sedentary lifestyle. I am always busy, but I knit and I crochet a lot.
gotcha.
So
Yeah.
I'm constantly using my hands. Like I never just sit down and watch TV. If there's TV on, it's not something I want to watch. It's something I can listen to. That's why I love podcasts and like listening to self-help and stuff like that, or whatever, because I'm constantly crocheting and knitting. So
Yeah, I feel you there. I may not crochet or knit, but I'm always online. I'm watching TV and then I'm online, either responding to emails or learning about some business thing or just whatever. But I'm always uh, busy, and at least mentally, if not physically.
yes.
Though I'm usually busy physically too. Um, so how did things, kind of play out as you were a teenager? You're baptized. You obviously kind of went all in there for a while with your friend here and everything. How did things kind of progress, as you went on into young adulthood?
Well, the boy that I had mentioned, the brother of the girl that I was studying with, I fell madly in love with him. And he was, I guess, that with me too for a while. And we even went to, because we weren't, obviously allowed to go to prom or anything,
Right.
but because we were both Jehovah's Witnesses and both of our schools had prom at the same time, I went to his junior prom with him. And I mean, we were best friends. We never officially, I guess, dated because we were like 15, 16, 17 years old when we were going through this. But I mean, he was like all eyes on him for 3 years. And my stepmom didn't really like it. And my dad certainly didn't really like it. So I got irritated because I'm like, I'm a really innocent person. Like, this isn't like I'm not trying to do bad things with him. Like, just want to be in his company. I just want to be friends with him. I just want to whatever. Well, then at one point, I think I was like 17, he decided he just didn't feel that way for me anymore, and that was devastating. And then it was kind of like, oh, now I can focus on other things because I'm not worried about him anymore. And I was really active with a lot of my other friends at the Kingdom Hall, and like for a really brief period, I like literally 3 weeks I dated, like I officially dated an older boy in the Kingdom Hall, and my dad did not like that, and he made me end it with him. So I was like, they had a way of making me feel dirty or making me feel like I was not being innocent with boys when I really seriously was. Like I had never really kissed a boy or done really anything until I had kissed the first boy, you know, and it was super innocent, and it's not like we were like making out all the time, but so anyway,
it is always funny to me how sex crazy um they are in the
yeah,
religion, how every time two people of the opposite sex are seen together in pretty much any capacity, they assume something is going on. It's really funny that they claim that the world outside is sex mad, but that's all that is on their mind.
yeah. And for me, that wasn't even something I wanted to necessarily do. I mean, obviously you're a teenager, you're hormonal, you
Sure.
think about it, but it's not something that I was like, oh, I better be careful because I might lose my virginity to this person. Like it wasn't about that, you know. So I just, I don't know, I became a really extroverted butterfly being a Jehovah's Witness, whereas before I was kind of very introverted, and I liked myself a lot when I was a Jehovah's Witness. And I think that's what I don't know, I think that's what made me flourish as one for the short period of time that I really was dedicated to it. And things started to change when my dad made me break up with the boy that I dated that was in the Kingdom Hall. Mostly my stepmom kind of like convinced him, you know, he's from an uneducated family. He was homeschooled. He doesn't have his GED. Because my stepmom's very pro college, which I know Jehovah's Witnesses aren't, but because she went to nursing school and she was a nurse, she's definitely pro. You need to go do something with yourself, and you're not going to settle for somebody who didn't do that for themselves.
Right.
Like, which I think that's a good thing. Like, I'm not saying that it was bad that they made me break up with him, but as a young teenager, the things that the excuses that they made, I thought were really harsh, you know. But they're like, oh, he comes from an uneducated family, and he had like where something wrong with his eyes, and he had really thick glasses, you know, but he was like literally the coolest person I'd ever met in my entire life. He was so fun, super nice, really funny. I didn't care that he had thick glasses. I'm more of a beauty on the inside. Like seriously, I don't care what anybody looks like. I just love people for who they are. And I think that they didn't believe me in that, or they just whatever. They didn't want me to be with him because they didn't like him. And
Yeah, it
so
doesn't
anyway,
sound like he was keeping up appearances that they wanted to keep up.
yeah, for sure. And so that's when I started to be like, well, listen, I go to school, I get good grades. I go to the Kingdom Hall every meeting, and I study for every meeting, even though I'm only getting 4 hours of sleep at night because I'm run down with anxiety, and I have insomnia, and I have to keep up those good grades. And for my own standards, I have to study for every meeting. And even though my stepmom didn't study for every meeting, or I would be like, hey, mom, let's study for the meeting that's coming up. And she would like want to, but then she's like, I'm just too tired. I'll do it later. You go ahead and do it, you know? So I was always studying. And then when I was in high school, during the time that I was baptized, I actually used that as always an opportunity to write an English paper about something that had to do with being a Jehovah's Witness, or I sat out of English class because they were learning about Greek mythology, and I would write a paper about being a Jehovah's Witness. Or, it just, whatever the situation was, I try to use it as an opportunity to study more. And I had, I don't remember what it was called, but because you were in it longer than I was. I left in 2008, but they had that disc where it had like every publication on it and
the
Bible.
Watchtower Library.
Yes. Okay. So I had that.
Yep.
And I would put it in the computer and I would just research so much stuff. And like, I always had questions about things, but didn't necessarily want to go to the elders for answers. I felt like I could find the answers on my own. And so I just was, every spare moment that I had, I was on the computer researching stuff through that particular CD-ROM. So anyway, I didn't really have questions about the religion itself. I didn't really have, I guess, a problem with the religion itself. It was the problem that I had with my parents was really the reason I eventually left. And then growing into an adult, and I see the, hypocrisies and the things and how I'm treated and how things should be. And that's what's, I guess, turned me so sour against it now. But when I was leaving, I was so depressed. I got so depressed because nothing I did was good enough. Like I said, I was getting good grades in school. Yeah. I was studying for the meetings. I was going to meetings, and I was going out in service. I was doing all the horse chores. I was cleaning the house. I was making dinner. I was watching my brother. If I had, a spare second of time where they would let me leave the house, I would go hang out with my Jehovah's Witness friends, and nothing was ever good enough. And it got to a point where, for instance, sorry, I'm going on a side tangent, but this is like really important to my story. It was around Christmas time, and my dad picked me up from high school, and my brother, we're sitting in the parking lot waiting for my brother, and there was a Christmas song that came on. Now, mind you, I know that it didn't say anything about Christmas. It didn't say anything about Jesus, but it was a song that they play at Christmas time. I can't even tell you which one it was. I don't remember.
Something about a snowman or jingling bells or something.
Yeah, something very neutral,
right.
But to me, and this is what I think my dad didn't realize or didn't care to realize, was for me, I celebrated Christmas with my mom when I was little. And that's a really sore spot for me. And it wasn't that I necessarily missed Christmas, but that time of year for me with my mom and my grandma was extremely special for me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I said, Dad, will you please shut that song off? Will you please change the station? He was so belligerent about the fact that I asked him to change that song because I was ridiculous. Like I was taking being a Jehovah's Witness too far, that I wouldn't listen to that song. And he wasn't going to change it. And he was like yelling at me in the car about how I was like being disrespectful to him because I wanted him to change that song or something. My dad was always like threatening to tell the elders on me about something. And I'm thinking, go ahead and I'll tell them how much weed you smoke and all this other crap that you do. Mr. I'm baptized now and I, scaredy cat and don't want to go confess my sins. So,
So he did get baptized then.
Oh, he did. He did get baptized after my mom and him got a divorce, like right before he married my stepmom. He ended up getting baptized.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, and I think it was mostly because he was feeling the pressure from his family, maybe. I actually don't know why he got baptized. He never really divulged any information about his own story to me, ever. Him and I don't really talk. He doesn't like me. So, he was very abusive. And so later that night when we got home, he was drinking. Mind you, I consider him an alcoholic. I know that's a self-diagnosed thing, but if you have to drink every single day, I'm sorry, you're an alcoholic. And I don't just mean like have a glass of wine every night. No, I mean like you're drinking 6+ beers every single night. Like you're an alcoholic to me. So, he was extremely verbally and mentally abusive. He would always like gaslight you, and no matter what the situation was, you were the one at fault. Um, it doesn't matter what was said, the way that you acted towards him was what was wrong, or what is the problem, and nothing was ever his fault. Or so anyways, he was drinking that night, and of course that the fact that I like told him to do something really ticked him off. And so my stepmom had already gone to bed, and I had just like taken a shower and was like, he was laying into me, and I was sitting on the couch. I was getting ready for bed, and I must have said something about a TV show that we were watching, and he just went off on me and was screaming in my face and telling me that he's going to tell the elders how disrespectful I am, and he's the man of the house, and who do I think I am? And I don't mean he's like sitting in the chair in the living room with me. I mean, he's sitting on the coffee table in front of me, 3 inches from my face, with his beer breath, spitting at me, yelling at me, telling me how much of a disrespectful little girl I am. And like I said, he's the head of the house. So anyway, this went on for like 20 minutes of him just screaming at me. And at this point, when I'm confronted like that, I have learned not to talk back, because that does not bode well for me in that house. Yeah. And so I would just sit there, and kind of, he would want me to look at him, look at me when I'm talking to you, kind of thing. So I would look at him, but because I was so dead inside about the whole thing, I had that deadpan look on my face, and he would hate that so much. He'd be like, "You look just like your mother. Get that look off your face," and I'm like, that's a whole nother story. And so finally, after he pounded his fist on the table like 3 or 4 times, it's a glass table, he almost broke it. My stepmom comes downstairs and she says, "Phil, what are you doing? Go to bed." And that was the end of that.
Oh.
Then I just like had to go to bed. And I was like, "Oh, okay, so it's over." And nobody else was here to see any of that other than my stepmom was woken up by him screaming and told him to go to bed. So I mean, that wasn't the first time it happened, but that
that just shows it's not, because your stepmom knew she could just come down and just be like, and just snap him out of it, and he, and it would be over. It's kind of sad that your stepmom didn't, she obviously knew he was in the wrong. And stopped it. But why didn't she, if she truly cared, she should have sat you down and had a real caring discussion with you about what just happened and try to help you. But
but he would do that in my room when nobody else was there, and I would just really just have to wait for it to be over.
Ugh.
Or
that's awful.
Oh yeah, or he would be drunk, and the only time he could ever show me any affection was like 1:00 in the morning. He had been drinking all night long, would come downstairs, and it's so funny because my bedroom was in the basement, and we had a 3-story house, and their bedroom was on the top floor. So I would be in the basement sleeping. He would come into my room, he would sit on my bed, and with his like drunk beer breath, "Oh, I love you, I love you, and I'm proud of you," and and then like want to give me a kiss, and it's all like beer nasty. And I'm sorry, alcohol is such a like, because my mom has issues with drinking too, and
sounds like it's very triggering for you.
Oh, it definitely is. Even when other people that I don't know your story, I don't know what you about, but if you're drunk, just get out of my face. Like I can't.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that was a defining part of your growing up, and honestly, I don't know. I'm not trying to. I guess I am trying to play armchair psychologist here or something, but I mean, your dad has some problems besides the alcohol. I mean,
Oh yeah.
the narcissism,
It's so bad.
I don't know if it's, like a narcissistic personality disorder or something, but that's just so abusive, and that's the kind of stuff, like you said, you had gotten to the point where you were so dead inside. That's the kind of stuff that breaks your spirit, and or that can break your spirit, and that is just so hard to live around, because like you're walking on eggshells. You never know when he's going to snap, and you don't know when that next time is going to come where he's 3 inches from your face,
Right.
spitting on you because he's so angry. That's just it's
The,
awful.
the funny thing too with that is he would, he was very much like, you need to go to bed. It's your bedtime. It's your bedtime. Well, if he would catch me in the basement, because the basement was very big, it had his office, my bedroom, a bathroom, the laundry room, and a rec room. And it was kind of like the catch-all because it was a walkout basement to the barn. So it was always very dirty because we had all the barn clothes. That's where the dog kennels were. That's like where, I lived. But anyway, if he caught me in the middle of the night cleaning down there, because I got to a point where I was compulsively cleaning because I couldn't sleep, he wouldn't tell me to go to bed. He'd be like, after he'd been drinking, he'd come down and maybe want to have one of those conversations with me. And he'd be like, oh, well, you probably should go to bed, but thanks for cleaning that. Or like he really wouldn't know what to say because he was like coming down he had something else in mind he wanted to talk about. But because I was cleaning, he was like okay with it. I
Oh
don't know.
wow.
It was weird. And so but that instance I had with him, I think, was definitely the turning point of me not wanting to live there with them anymore. I was 17 when it happened, or 16, I don't know, almost 17. And so and because the boy that I had, was crazy about didn't feel that way about me anymore, and I couldn't date anybody else at the Kingdom Hall. It wasn't like I was boy crazy, but I felt like if I hung out with a boy, that would mean that he was my boyfriend because we would have to be chaperoned. And it's like, no, I just get along with boys better. I have a more, I guess, tomboy thing about me. I was into sports and doing like playing games and video games, and I was really nerdy. So, I started to get super depressed because I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere anymore. And a lot of the girls stopped, I think, liking me at the Kingdom Hall because the boys liked me. I don't want to sound super conceited because I don't really know how many of them actually liked me, but
Yeah, but
two
I
of
can
the most
definitely see
popular
that.
ones liked
Yeah.
me, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I can see that.
Yeah, and so then it was like I was distancing myself from the girls at the Kingdom Hall. And then Michelle, my really good friend that we went to high school together, she graduated a year before me. So I was in high school for a whole year by myself, and she started going to the Kingdom Hall that was closer to her and not my Kingdom Hall. So she started making friends at the other Kingdom Hall she was going to and hanging out with them. So we were distancing, each other, and I just felt really alone. I got to a point where I would just call the guy that I had dated for that short period of time. I would call him in the middle of the night and I would just talk to him for hours and hours on end. And he wasn't weird. He wasn't like trying to like be my boyfriend. He was just a really good friend, and he would just talk to me and he would confess because he wasn't baptized. He was an unbaptized publisher. So he would confess to me that he was drinking, and he was glad I called because then he could like, lay some of his stuff on me, and then I'd lay some of my stuff on him, and we would like kind of hate on everybody with each other. And so I had gotten so low with it at home that now mind you, at this point I'm trying to actually be friendlier towards the people that I was friends with prior in school because I'm there by myself without Michelle. So I have to survive one way or another.
Yeah.
I started talking to my friend Rachel again, and she was very accepting. And then there was a boy at school that was showing interest in me. And I didn't let anybody in. Like, I would sit next to my two girlfriends that I had there, and like, boys would, like, whatever, talk to me and try and flirt with me and stuff. And I was just like, nope. Like, there was a wall there. You were not breaking through. I don't care how charming you are. I don't care how silly you are. I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm not going to anything because I'm not supposed to. So, but as I'm getting close to my friends in school and I start like breaking down my barriers towards other new people at school, and my home life was so terrible, I would sneak my stepmom's painkillers. And me being super naive about how medicine works, I thought I had overdosed on like 4 Motrin. So like, this is over. Like, I've taken 4 extra strength, prescription strength Motrin. I'm gonna have to have my stomach pumped. I hope that I just die before the ambulance gets here. Like, I was ready to just like end it all. I really seriously wanted to just die because I was so lonely at home.
Yeah.
And
It would be a way out.
Yeah, and I would sneak their alcohol at night, my parents' alcohol, just a little bit, you know, just to try and like help me go to sleep. And nothing really worked. And then I had called my friend Rachel, and I told her what I did, and she's like, no, you're going to be fine. You didn't overdose. Like, you're going to be fine. She's like, but I really hate that you are in that situation. Like, how did you get to that point? You know, so I was really confiding in her. And then one boy that was friends with all of us, or well, her like group, he was really showing an interest in me. And so like I would hang out with him at school and we talked. And then I liked him, and he like asked me out. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, we'll just be like boyfriend and girlfriend at school kind of thing. Because obviously I can't hang out with you outside of school. But then I got really ballsy, and because my bedroom was in the basement and it was a walkout basement, he convinced me to sneak out in the middle of the night, walk down my driveway, and go through the woods to where his truck was, and he would take me to his house, and we would hang out at his house for a couple of hours, and he'd make sure that I got back home before 4 o'clock in the morning so that nobody would know that I was gone. So I would do this for like a month. A couple times a week I would sneak out and I'll go to his house. And because things obviously progressively were getting worse at home, and I was trying to keep up a facade with them, but knowing that, no, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. I don't want this. Like, I want to be able to do what I want to do and not be judged for it. Or at least if you're going to judge me for doing something, then I am going to do something bad, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Because I was such a goody two-shoe that like, I'm going to give you a reason.
Yeah, if you're going to accuse me of it, I'm going to at least do it.
Exactly. So that's when he was he was really into smoking weed. And so I tried that with him, and I'm thinking, what does it matter? My parents do it. So it's not like they can get mad at me for doing it, you know, because they do it. So I smoked weed with him. And then it was right after my 18th birthday. I decided I'm done. I need to have a reason to not be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, because my parents aren't going to let me not be one, especially my stepmom. And so I had sex with this boy. And when I went home, and see, like, because things happened so fast, like, it's hard for me to remember exactly the timeline of it. But I know that I told my dad and my stepmom that I snuck out and was with Chris, and I had sex with him, and that I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, and that they would have to disfellowship me because I had premarital sex, and you can't say I can't be a Jehovah's Witness anymore because I did this bad thing. And I said, and I'm not going to the Kingdom Hall anymore. I'm not studying. I'm doing nothing. And I think my dad at that point, because he was so good at bullying me, he didn't know what to do. He was dumbfounded.
Bullies don't know what to do when you stand up to them.
No, and he didn't know what to say. I mean, he was speechless, other than he said that he threatened to sue Chris with statutory rape. And I was like, yeah, you can't because I'm 18. He's like, oh, was it a birthday present? I'm like, whatever. That was the dumbest thing to say. Is it a birthday present? So anyway, he didn't really know, I guess, what to say. And my stepmom was like, I'm going to take you to that Kingdom Hall and drag you by your hair. If you know, whether you want to go or not, I will drag you. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I waited in the car at the Kingdom Hall. I had a couple of people, which was super weird. A couple of people that like I barely knew. I mean, they were nice people, but they like came out to the car, and the one girl, I had hung out with her a couple times, and she was like begging me not to do whatever it is that I was about to do. She just knew something was going to happen, and she just felt the need to come out and talk to me because she just didn't want me to do what I was going to do. And like she would like confess this story about how she had a blood transfusion when she was a kid, and she just remembered how bad it was, and how she feels like there's the soul of an old man living in her because of the blood transfusion she had. And
oh my God.
it was super random. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, you don't even know what's going on, and you're out here begging me to not do something. So she went back inside, and then after the meeting was over, I went back inside, and my stepmom obviously had talked to the elders and told them what happened. And so like that was my official meeting, was that night. And I went in and I talked to them, and they they asked me what happened. I told them exactly what had happened, and I said, and I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. And the one elder, which is the elder of the wife that my mom studied with, I was really close with him and his wife, and I felt bad because I did really like them, and he just looked like he was heartbroken, I think, that I was leaving because he did like me so much. And but at that point, like I said, I was pretty dead inside to everything that had to do with anything with all of that. And so that night I was disfellowshipped, and later that week, because it had gotten so bad at my house that I skipped school. In the middle of class, I convinced Rachel to skip class with me. Not that I really had to like convince her. She was like, yeah, let's get your shit. Let's go. We drove to my house, and I packed up all my stuff in my bedroom in her car, and I left, and I never went home. So, I like basically emancipated myself at 18 and finished high school.
So let me ask you, how was it at home after you were disfellowshipped?
It just was.
Like, were you shunned at home, or?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't really that. I don't think I waited very long to really see what would happen after I left. I was just ready. I didn't want to see them anymore. I didn't want to be a part of anything anymore. I literally think it was maybe 2 days after I was disfellowshipped that I just left.
So you were just done with all of it.
I was so done with everything.
I don't blame you, but
yeah.
That is a ballsy move at 18, to, like you said, pretty much emancipate yourself. Where did you go?
Well, I wanted to stay with Rachel, but her parents did not like my parents. And you can't blame them, but they didn't really want that kind of drama in their house, which I definitely didn't blame them for. So Rachel's like, as much as you are my friend and I want to help you, you can't stay here. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But Chris, the boy that I was dating, he just lived at home with his dad, and his dad worked night shift. And then like he went to school while his dad was sleeping, and his dad was really cool about me coming and staying. Like Chris kind of told him the situation, and his dad was like, oh yeah, that's fine. So I moved in with Chris, and I think that's like why my dad's family thinks like I'm boy crazy, but it's like that's really the only place I could stay.
You gotta get in where you fit in at that point.
Exactly. So after that, because obviously I didn't tell my parents what I was going to be, to this day, the thing I regret the most about that part about it was my little brother was 8 years old and had never gone home on the bus by himself. And like, yeah, I know he's 8 years old, but I guess at the time I thought he was so much more naive than he probably was. And like I said, we grew up in a very rural area, so for him to like take the 35-minute bus ride home and then not know where I'm at, and I'm always there, and then he has to like be home, and then he's home after school by himself at 8 years old. Nobody's there because everybody's at work for hours on end, like I felt really bad about that. That's literally the only thing I felt bad about.
Yeah, and that's really sweet, but the reality is that he wasn't your responsibility.
Oh, I know that, but they had
but
made it so that he kind of was.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. And
so.
I totally understand feeling like you abandoned him in that situation, um, whether or not it was your responsibility or not. Um, I'm sure you didn't. I'm sure you. It's a shame you couldn't have taken him with you.
Yeah, I
On
know.
some level.
Yeah, he and I do love my brother, but him and I have never really meshed well. He's like a totally different person. He's like
Yeah.
an alien to me. Like we just don't have anything in common or anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah, especially as you grow up and grow up differently as
yeah.
well. Um, so you're disfellowshipped. You're on your own now. You're living with Chris and his family. Do you go ahead and complete high school, and then do you go to college, or how does life play out after that?
So I'd always wanted to be a beautician, and I think that that definitely like fell within the, oh, you could totally do that as a Jehovah's Witness, because yeah, you have to go to school, but it's not for very long.
Right.
So everybody was pretty supportive about me being a beautician, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. So I graduated high school. Nobody came. I was like, whatever, that's fine. My mom's side of the family, I was like talking to more. And after I left, I went and visited my grandmother, and I called my mother and talked to her and told her what happened. And she was just so ecstatic that I wasn't living there with my dad anymore, and I had like broken free from everything. So she came into town to visit me. She was living in Indianapolis at the time. And so I graduated high school fine, and I wanted to go to beauty school. And this is where it gets like super weird because I'm really messed up. I'm doing a lot of drugs with Chris. I'm kind of like just living out this extremely rebellious and very irresponsible part of my life where I don't know how to get a job. I don't know how, the only job outside of doing chores for my parents or painting wood in the summertime for my dad's business was I was when I was 14 or 15, my friend Michelle had gotten me a job at one of the resorts around there as a housekeeper for the summer.
Oh
So,
yeah, cleaning.
it was a somebody who knows somebody kind of job,
Yep.
So I'd never gotten a job on my own. I didn't even know how to do anything. Like, what do I put on a resume? I've never done anything. So it was really hard for me to like get a job and to really do anything to support myself. So Chris would kind of do it. And then my dad and stepmom, they kind of, I don't know what it was that gave them kind of a change of heart. Maybe they were going through, I don't know, their own issues with things after I had left. So we kind of started talking again. There was an instance I don't really want to share on here because it's extremely personal, but it kind of threw my stepmom back in my life. And so she would call me and see how I was doing. And so I told her, like, I still want to go to beauty school, but I want to go to beauty school at this college that's an hour and a half away. And I can't really afford the gas to go down there. Like, I can get student loans to get me through the college, but like actually having the extra money, because beauty school is a 40-hour a week school. It's like a real job without getting paid. It's like an internship, but you're paying them. So to have a job outside of that is really hard when you don't have reliable transportation or extra money to drive all the way there. So she says, well, I want to help you with college. I still think you need to go to college. I still think you need to do something, and I will help you with that. I'll give you money, just a little side money to like help you with your gas and, for your travels. I'll give you like $500 a month to go toward. That'll be our contribution to you getting an education. So I was like, well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you. I was like, but you do realize I'm not going to come back to the Kingdom Hall. And she's like, well, that's not really a stipulation, but as much as I want you to come back, like, I'll still help you, but you just need to think about it. Just pray about it, I was like, okay, whatever. And then my dad, he's like, well, what is Chris doing? Does he need a job? Because I need somebody who needs to do this or that around the job site. And, like I could probably throw him some work if he needs some money to do whatever. And so I was like, yeah, like I'll ask him. And Chris was like, yeah, if he wants to give me work, I'll do it. So he started working for my dad. And then my dad had a conversation with me about, well, do you love him? You'll never be accepted back or be able to come back to the Kingdom Hall or be a part of this family unless you're married. You can't just be living in sin. So he's like, do you really love him? I was like, well, yeah, I love him, because I didn't really know, whatever. I was like, yeah, I love him. And so I convinced him to marry me. And we got married. I was 19. And that did not go well. Our marriage obviously fell apart within like 6 months. I divorced him when I was 20. But mostly because I had so many of my own issues, but he did a lot of drugs at the time. And I was like, yeah, that was fun for a minute.
Yeah.
Like I did that in my rebellious phase, but let's grow up here. Like I'm actually a pretty responsible person. I can have my head on my shoulders when I want to, kind of thing. And I was over it, and he was not ready to be over that. And for me, it was just kind of like, I really don't want these series of mistakes to be who I am in my real life, kind of thing. So I left him, and he was devastated, because at that point, I think that's when he realized that he did want to be with me, even though we weren't really the greatest couple. And I had gone to the Kingdom Hall a couple of times after we got married, and just the looks that I got at that Kingdom Hall, I was just like, oh, this is not, I know I cannot do this. Especially the boy that I was in love with. He was there, and he was just looking at me like, who are you? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to please everyone, and I had made an offhand comment about my dad being an a-hole to one of his employees. And it was supposed to be a joke. I said it in a joking way. I didn't say it in a malicious way. Well, they got back to him that I had said that, and it must have been misconstrued the way I said it, because after that, Chris didn't have any more work. Oh, I'm not helping you with college. You're so disrespectful. You're not even going to the Kingdom Hall. You couldn't even finish going to the meetings, and so now I'm stuck in a marriage. My parents have cut me off. And they, Chris isn't working anymore, and I'm already in college. I'm making it to, beauty school every day. I found a girl that lived by me that I carpooled with, and it just got so to the point where I didn't have any money. I couldn't keep going to that school. I had to drop out. And then, I was like $4,000+ in debt from taking out a school loan to get into a college that I didn't even, finish. And, Chris and I's relationship was really rocky and falling apart. And so, when I left him, I just moved to Indianapolis with my mom, and I stayed with her. But because all of her and I's relationship was non-existent for 5 years. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we were thrown back together, and she didn't know how to it was weird because like as a kid she wanted to be my friend, not necessarily my mom. And then now that I'm an adult, she wanted to be my mom and not my friend. So then she's like trying to tell me how to live my life, and I'm like, girl, I just left a place that was like this. You cannot tell me how to live my life now that I am 20 years old, and yeah, I'm living with you, but come on. Like, so her and I's relationship was very rocky for a really long time. And she helped me though get a job. Like, she's really good at getting a job. She's really good at making your resume look good. And she definitely helped me get into that. And I worked at JCPenney here in Indianapolis. And that's actually where I had met my current husband. Him and I sold shoes together. So, but yeah, that's how all that ended up.
Well,
being.
that's so. Have you ever talked to that side? I think I know the answer to this, is why I'm stumbling, but have you ever talked to your witness side of your family anymore?
My dad's parents died, and I was with my current husband. We were only together for maybe 6 months or so when my grandfather died, and my grandma had already passed. And I was invited to the funeral at the Kingdom Hall, and I told Eric, Eric's my husband. I told him kind of like, about my past and everything. And I said, I want to go. I think this will be a good opportunity to try and, mend things, considering they reached out to me to tell me that Grandpa died. And I said, but I'm going to warn you, like, this is going to be super awkward. I'm not going to stay with them. We're going to get a hotel room because I can't stay with them. I can't anything. And we went up there, we got our hotel room, and then we got a phone call like, hey, we're having like all the family's going to get together here at the house. Please come. We would like for you guys to be here. And I said, okay. So we go, and my dad, I mean, he loved his parents so much. He would do anything for them. He did a lot of things for them. And I think that's why he felt like his kids should be that way towards him. Like, it didn't matter what our relationship was. Like, you lived and breathed and died for your parents. That's kind of how he was with his parents. And, so I went to their house, and my dad gave me a really big hug. He's crying and everything. And like, I'm really sad. Like, I start crying, and then he takes his hand on the back of my head and yanks my head back by my hair, and was like, I don't even remember what he said because I was so shocked that he did that. But basically he was like, you need to straighten your life out and be a part of this family, kind of thing. And I hit him on the chest and pushed him away. And I was like, see, this is why we don't have a relationship. You are not allowed to touch me this way. You are not allowed to talk to me this way. This is why our relationship is so volatile. And if you want a relationship with me, we have to stop right here. Not pretend that things didn't happen, but you did stuff, I did stuff. Let's call it a day. Let's start over. If you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to do that. And I think because of his parents' death, he was willing to accept that, I guess. And so from then on, we were pretty much okay. I mean, once in a while we would have a text message between each other where we would like disagree on things, and he would try and bully me into thinking a certain way, or, would make comments about how I was a dumb kid and I did this and that and made these mistakes, and don't you wish you didn't do that? And, you realize when you're older that your parents were right. And, he would say things like that.
He seems like a very insecure person.
Yeah.
Constantly needs validation that he's the big man on campus.
Yes. And I think because I wasn't there, he kind of transferred that aggression towards my brother. Yeah. And so when I would visit them, and he would get upset about something, or my brother did something that made him mad. Like I had told you in our conversation before that I would like stand in the doorway, like I'm going to be that somebody that sticks up for my little brother. We may not get along, may not be close, but I'm not going to let you bully somebody on my watch. Like, I'm not scared of you anymore. I proved that I could leave and I could not rely on you and I could stand up to you and you wouldn't do a thing about it. So, I would try to be that for him. Well, then Eric and I, a few years later, fast forward, I got pregnant. We weren't married. I was scared to get married again because of the stigma that not only my mom had for being married a few times. Everybody's, oh, you're just going to be like your mom. Well, no, I got married because I was pressured into it, my first marriage, and it was a joke. So this next time I'm not getting married unless I know that this is for real and I want to be with this person and share life with them. So we got pregnant and we had our first kid in 2014. And late 2014. So in the summer of 2014, they were having the international convention. And I was visiting
in Indianapolis, right?
Yeah, I think it was in Indianapolis.
Last thing I ever went to.
Yeah. And I was visiting my parents because I'm from Michigan. So I was up in northern Michigan visiting them. And at that point, from the years that I had left to that point, my parents lost their house, lost their business, the barn business, and everybody else had to find somewhere to take their horses. My stepmom had to get rid of a lot of her horses.
Oh, wow.
And board somewhere else. So my dad had bought a piece of property in a different part of town, and he was going to build the next house that they had. They were going to build their own house with cash, no mortgage, so that if he was out of work like he had been, that nobody could take their house away from them. So in the meantime, they stripped that property that they lived at before, because my dad literally built everything on that property. So he's like, yeah, the bank owns the house, but they don't own this barn, and they don't own my shop, and they don't own this fence. And so he like stripped that place and took all the materials to this new place and built himself a pole barn. So they're living out of this pole barn, and I'm visiting them. I'm really pregnant, and an elder from the congregation that my family originally went to, like, when I was a little kid. So he's a family friend. I've known him my entire life. I'm pregnant. And I answer the door, and he says, oh, hi, Sydney. And I was like, hi, Gary. And he's like, well, how you doing? Obviously he's an elder, so he can technically talk to me. And I was like, I'm good. I'm, pregnant with my first kid or whatever. We're just kind of being friendly. And I think mostly because we were family friends, like I've known him my whole life. It wasn't as like, oh, you're a disfellowshipped person, I need to keep this strictly business.
Right.
So he's like, well, I was here to talk to your dad. But since you're here, how about I just let you know about this little, I'm just was going to give him this pamphlet about the international convention, and I'm just standing there like, And he said something to me that really started me down the path of, this religion is BS. Not only do I not want to be a part of it because of my own personal reasons, but this is obscene. He decided to make a comment about how, well, you should really go to this. I think you'd like it. I think it would help you come back to Jehovah because you're having a little one now. You don't want them to not make it. And I was like, are you effing kidding me?
That's manipulative.
And you're going to tell me that because of my spirituality that God's just going to destroy my kid and just not even give him a chance because of my spirituality?
That's what they believe.
No, and then my stepmom, she was like in the shower, or she was doing something where she couldn't come to the door. Gary left. I was nice to him, but I relayed the message to Penny, my stepmom, and I said, that's not okay with me. Is that okay with you? That you believe that this religion believes that? Can you believe that? And she goes, well, yeah, I mean, I know that that's like what they believe, but like she didn't really know what to say. And I was like, you're seriously going to stand there and look at me and tell me that God is going to destroy my child and he's not going to live because of a mistake I made? And she's like, well, it does say that the children pay for the sins of the father. I said, yeah, in the Old Testament, but the New Testament says that Jesus died for all of us. So that's null and void. She's like, well, yeah, I mean, I get that. She's like, I don't really know, like she doesn't really know what to say when you make a logical when you say something that is so logical and she knows that they don't believe that or that they believe in other ways. She's just like, whatever. Like, yeah, maybe I don't really agree with that, but
Well, yeah, she knows it looks really bad. What they actually believe looks pretty horrific, but they know how it looks to the outside world, so they have no problem mincing words to try to give off the optics that they want to give.
Right. Well, and then my dad, when he found out that I was pregnant, he was real mad. I think mostly, I mean, I wasn't married and he really, really liked my husband though. So I don't think he was mad that I was pregnant with who I was pregnant with. I think he was just mad that I was having a kid and I wasn't married. And my dad at the time he just never feels like I am a sufficient human being or something. So even though he loves his grandkids, he hasn't met the newest one. And I mean, he's like crazy though about my older son and my daughter. So, but every time I've gotten pregnant, he just has to, and mind you, he doesn't freaking go to the Kingdom Hall. And he'll say, I can't believe you're bringing another soul into this treacherous world.
Oh,
and Armageddon is right around the corner. And how could you be so cruel as to getting pregnant again and bringing another beautiful soul into this world? So that was like, oh, I just would
such
get
such a cheerful outlook.
No kidding.
I mean, it's the way they see the world, though. They think that it's almost irresponsible to bring children into this world because it's just going to be destroyed. And yeah, once your kids reach that age of accountability, then even if you were a witness, then you can't help them. They have to stand on their own. So it's a pretty tough way of seeing just everything from the daily life to any future prospects, including your kids. And I'm sorry that they threw that guilt trip on you there at the door about your unborn child. That's
Oh, I was so mad. And my stepmom, she knew better than to like try and defend it. I mean, she was just like, yeah, no, I don't really, know what to say about that because you're not going to tell a pregnant woman that you agree with that man that was at the door because I'm going to gouge your eyes out.
So you have, you clearly left for those personal reasons, and left the religion. And like you said, when that elder is standing at the door and he's trying to use this opportunity to shame you into coming back to the cult. What is it though? Like, from there, how did you start waking up, mentally? Did you start, looking into the religion more? What did you start doing that has kind of helped you from there?
Well, my parents, like has shown in my story, they kind of they were flip-floppy as far as the shunning thing. They would shun me if they felt like it was justified, but then their conscience would be getting in the way and wanting to reach out because, like I said, they really liked my husband. Now they have grandkids, and it's kind of like, oh, well, I can overlook certain things or I cannot shun her as long as she is good enough, just so I can see my grandkids and things like that. And And it went back and forth, because if I posted a picture of us like dressed up for Halloween, oh, well, then I'm not, they're not going to talk to me for a year. And then, well, then they're going to start talking to me again, because when I voice my opinions or my logical thinking, they don't really know what to say. I mean, my stepmom will agree with me on a lot of things that I have issues with, but at the end of the day, she still thinks it's the truth. She still thinks that I need to come back. And, now I have put a kibosh to the back and forth, and I am making them shun me because they want to for their religion. They don't want to because of their humanity, but I'm not allowing them to go back and forth on it anymore. I've blocked them from contacting me, and as hard as it is, as sad as it is, I think it's better for me to not have that turmoil, and I'm not going to put that on my kids. And that's when I really wanted to get into, now, why is this so bad? I know why it's bad because of what I think, but why is this so bad? And that's when I started to really listen to shows like your show, or Lady C and her husband that does their show, the Critical Thinking Show, and just a lot of stuff I didn't even know was going on, like the 2 witness rule. And I mean, there's so much that I was like, wow, my story is like nothing in comparison to some of these people and what they've gone through. And like, I knew it wasn't the truth. I knew it wasn't a good religion. I felt as though it was a cult. I just never had the proof.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what constituted as a cult until I researched it. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. All of this is, yeah. So,
And when you grow up with it, you don't really have clear vision as to what it is. It's interesting for me, actually on a few of these interviews, and then just on forums and things. It's always fascinating for me to hear what the loved one of someone who is a witness says when they go to the meeting for the first time. And so many times they'll apparently come out of a Kingdom Hall and be like, that's messed up. And for us that was just normal because it's all we knew. But apparently, for people who have any amount of perspective on the outside, who go, they can pretty quickly see what's going on. And
yep.
So it's very tough, and it takes somebody to kind of open your eyes or show you that, when you're finally starting to wake up, because it's really hard to get enough distance from it to see it for what it is anymore.
Right.
Is there anything that you'd like people to know about the religion? That is there anything you've learned about it in particular that you think people should know, who have never been a witness before?
Yeah, they're nice when they come to your door, and I was nice too, but I was naive.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are just sheep. And, people say how bad this religion is, and then they say, oh, yeah, but these people are so nice. Well, yes, they are nice. And they're probably very decent people, but they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they think they do, and they're well-meaning people. And so, like, don't be super, rude to them, but at the same time, just don't even bother with it. Just don't.
Yeah, it's not the people that are horrible necessarily. It's the culture that they're involved in. This thing that's bigger than them.
Right.
What
Well,
about?
oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Well, too, I get so frustrated with people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, but they love people who are. And so you say, okay, but what about this and this? And they get so brainwashed into thinking that if anybody says anything bad about that religion, well, then that's their problem. Like, it's not true. People are just making up lies. Like, people who aren't even Jehovah's Witnesses will say that. And it bothers me because it's like there's always two sides to a story. And the fact that you're dismissing this other person's story just because it shows a bad light on something that you don't think is that bad is wrong.
Yeah.
And you need to listen to other people's stories, because just because somebody on Yelp says that a restaurant is terrible doesn't mean it is. Just because somebody says it's delicious doesn't mean it is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
So
right. And
I get your it's just that
right.
bothers me.
I think, religion is so personal.
Yes.
It is a person's individual faith, their individual hope for salvation, it helps them overcome their individual fears of death, mortality, the world around them. It gives them some sense of control. When you start threatening that, people tend to lash out personally because it hurts. It's something that emotionally fills something in them that they need, and
Yep.
to each his own. Whatever anyone wants to believe, that's fine. The only problem is when you start hurting other people,
Yes.
and unfortunately, Jehovah's Witnesses don't have the greatest track record as far as not hurting people or allowing some of the most vulnerable among them to be hurt.
Yes.
And it's very sad. Um, do you think that your past still impacts you? Just as a person?
Oh, for sure. I still have a really like, because I'm lucky now. My husband works two jobs and he allows me to be a stay-at-home mom to our three children. I have a hard time being out in the real world and working. Um, like when I was selling shoes where I met him, I came from being a total extrovert, super butterfly in the Kingdom Hall to clamming back up. And then when I had to get a real job here in Indianapolis, it was like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to talk to people again anymore. I didn't know how to relate to the culture down here compared to the really sheltered, really small, predominantly white culture of northern Michigan. Like I had one black friend and he was half Irish, and he's also gay, and was the only black kid in our school. So, I mean, he was an anomaly in itself. It wasn't like he was like other, African American people I've met. So, which is funny to this day, him and I are actually still pretty good friends, and we would have a lot of like religious discussions because before he came out as gay, his dad, he went to a regular Christian church, but we would have a lot of meaningful conversations about church and things like that. And now he's like, I'm gay and I'm atheist, and if you don't like it, whatever. And I'm like, I'm not anything, and if you don't like it, whatever. So we've kind of bonded over that now too. So yeah.
Yeah, but it is hard to come out of the religion and then try to live life in the normal world to some degree, and find out where you fit in, and
Well, and not feeling like you really have any. I think that's the biggest thing is like, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you have this destination that you're going to get to eventually. And so you just like live day by day as it comes. Whereas when you're free of that, you're like, you don't even know where to begin on possibilities of what you could do with your life or where you could go. And a lot of times I feel like I have the want to do things, but I don't have the courage to take that leap, to get out of my comfort zone that I have established now as a stay-at-home mom. Or I don't think, like, if I was going to go back to college to do something, what on earth would that be? Like, I ended up going back to beauty school, and I actually have a beauty license. I graduated from beauty school here in Indianapolis, but that was super hard for me also. So I'm like, I just don't even know if I want to go down that route. When my kids are in school, am I going to get a job, or am I just going to be one of those moms that just totes all the kids everywhere they want to go and be at all the sports and do all the things? I don't even know what I want for myself. Right now, I'm kind of living vicariously through my children, even though they're, 3, 2, and 6 months. So,
well, that is a great point, though. Freedom while a great quality, um, it's not. It always comes with certain prices, and one of those is responsibility.
Hmm.
You're responsible for your own life now. You can't just hand it over to a cult and say, "Here, you tell me what to do, and you tell me when to do it, and I'll do it, and then life will
Right.
be okay." It's it's scarier because now we have to make our own decisions. We have to decide, does this fit for me or does this not? And because you and I, and a lot of the people listening have never had that opportunity really, especially from our formative years, it's very difficult to suddenly be kind of out there and be like, well, what do I want to do? I don't know. I've never been able to do what I wanted to do. So it's
Right.
it's not easy to quite figure out, because we've done what other people wanted us to do for so long.
Well, and for me too, as far as life skills went, I can clean a house like nobody's business, and I can
You want
shovel
to
poo
move down toward
really
Louisville and
well.
get a job?
Well, and it was you're not very far away from where I live, so I told my husband, I was like, maybe I'll just go down there and do the interview. He's like, and leave me with these three kids for that long? I don't think so. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we'd end up hiring you anyway. Put you to work.
well, it's funny too because I told my husband, I'm so like quirky sometimes. I have this obsession with watching on YouTube professional cleaning videos.
Oh, really?
It's an outlet for me to watch professional carpet cleaning people go into these places like
Yeah.
restaurants and the carpet's nasty and they like bring it back to life, and I tell him, I'm like, I want to do that so bad, like something about that is so satisfying, and he's just like, you are so weird.
Well, then I guess I'm weird too. I don't sit around watching the videos, but I was,
You do it though.
but I do it, and yeah, there is something satisfying to taking something and making it shine again, or
Yeah.
restoring it in some way through the cleaning process. That's funny. Um, maybe that. Who knows? Maybe in the future that is something that you could pursue if you enjoy it. I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with doing that. Um,
Yeah, and I told him, I was like, how come there's never any women in these videos? Like, I want to be the first woman in these videos professionally cleaning these carpets with these guys. Like, I just want to do that.
so there really aren't. That's interesting to me. I guess if I think about it, yeah, anytime I've ever been around a carpet cleaner in apartments or houses or anything, it's always a man.
Yeah.
That's
Which is funny
interesting.
because cleaning, being a maid is predominantly like a woman's,
Oh yeah, because I'm a
seen as
man
a
and I
woman's profession.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm a man and I clean houses and there's I've run into issues in the past where women didn't want me to clean in their house because they didn't think I could clean because I was a
right.
man. So, it's funny. There's all kinds of prejudgments about those types of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. Start you a carpet cleaning business. That would be awesome.
Or at
Um,
least find somebody that I can work for that does that. So, yeah.
well, what are some things? Um, well, let me ask you this. I mean, I guess you do have right now some distance between you and your family.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this has been an issue for you or not. I can't remember if we've talked about it before, but um, sometimes it's difficult when ex-witnesses have kids. Sometimes their witness relatives will want to have something to do with them, but it's really just to kind of get at the kids, to try to teach, because they want to save the kids. They want to teach them, quote, the truth.
Hmm.
um, and so at least with this distance, you don't have to worry about that right now. But is there anything that, if you had something you could say to your family, if they hear this and they were to want to shut you off again, which it sounds like they kind of do anyway, um, is there anything you would want to say to them?
Um, Mostly that um, it breaks my heart that my kids won't see the good side of them that I know that they have, that I've been able to experience occasionally with them. They're better at sharing that with everybody else but me, but I know it's there and I know they're genuine. I know that they love my kids, and I'm very sad that they're not going to have that with my kids, because a lot of who I am, I think the good qualities that I have come from my dad. I think that the good qualities he has, I definitely got some of those, and for them to not know who they are as a part of me makes me really sad. But at the same time, I'm firm on my children not being a part of that. I don't want them to hurt the way I did. I don't want them to not know what real love is. I don't want their love for my children to be conditional. I don't think that that's fair on a child,
Yeah.
especially a child. As an adult, it's whatever. You know, people come and go in your life, even your family. But as a child, I don't want them to know what that feels like. And maybe that's sheltering, and maybe that's because of my own upbringing. I'm going to, go maybe too extreme on that, or people might think that that's a little bit extreme. But I very much feel that I don't want my children to go through that. My husband didn't go through that, and he's a perfectly fine person. If
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
he knows what it's like to have love. And a lot of times I don't think he understands, or he just really doesn't know how to relate to me on a lot of things, or how I feel. But his family's never done that to him, so he's just okay with us not being close with them, because he doesn't want our children to have to deal with that. So if anything, I just want to tell them, they may look at it like this is my fault, but it's not, because I gave them the opportunity to be in their life. I just ask them to not um, pressure me into anything, and to not talk to me about that, religion anymore. And it doesn't matter what I have said to other people, what they have seen or heard me say to other people, or on Facebook or whatever. If you wanted to be a part of your grandkids' life, you could have, and you can't put all of that on me. So,
Yeah, I think it's always one of the saddest things to me is when not only do they shun the ex-witness, but they shun their kids, or they'll jerk their kids in and out. They'll be there for the kids for a while, and then suddenly they're shunning again or whatever. It's just, you would think that if you had a religion and you claimed Jesus to be your Christ, to be your exemplar, a man who never shunned anyone, a man who ate with the tax collectors and the sinners, a man that um, drew little kids to him because he was so sincere. You would think that if you wanted to create something attractive to other people, to draw them to your religion, that you would do so with love, and that you would do so um, with positivity, and not fear and shame, guilt and shunning and all this stuff. And it's so sad that kids get caught in the crossfire of something that, you know, what did they do? They didn't do anything. And ultimately, in the end, it's your parents that are deciding to treat you a certain way. It's their fault. Jehovah's Witnesses they are so masterful at victim shaming or victim
mm-hmm.
blaming. They're so masterful at saying, well, you didn't follow this prescribed course that I set up for you unfairly. So therefore, because you decided to be you and not be a copy of me, and you decided to go your own way, well, therefore you're a bad person and you have destroyed the family. But no, because it was an unfair and unrealistic expectation from day one that you conform to something that was their choice and their decision. They got to make that choice. Why don't you? And it's
Right.
just such an unfair um, thing to
Well,
put upon people.
and they like to put that on me though, that it was my choice because I got baptized.
And
But it's
you and I, and what's funny is, and I'm going to speak to your parents or stepmom and dad right now, is they didn't get baptized as kids.
yeah, they don't
They
really
don't
know what
know.
it's like.
Yeah, they don't know. They were able for whatever reason to skirt that, but as kids, there's tremendous pressure to get baptized. And if
Yeah.
nothing else, I don't care what it is. How many things do you hold a So how old were you when you got baptized? Let me ask you.
I was 16.
16. How many things do you hold a 16-year-old to for the rest of their life? How many decisions that a person that is 16 years old that they make are therefore reflective of an honest decision, not undue influence, where a person has only ever had really one choice, but an honest and true decision to make for the rest of their lives. You're 16. You're just learning how to drive. You can't get married. You can't drink alcohol. Jesus didn't get baptized till he was 30, and he was the perfect son of God if you believe in the Bible. So, I've never understood how they can hold kids to decisions for the rest of their life and do so callously, with
Yeah.
just this cavalier attitude of, well, you made the decision, you were 16, come on. Like it's so unfair. It was one thing that I remember in my own story with my brother who was shunned. I remember asking my mom one time, like, why are we supposed to shun him for something he did when he was like 13, 14 years old, whatever it was. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it never made sense to me that you could that this kid who grew up with kind of only knowing one way, or in a family where there was a lot of pressure, or in every kingdom hall there's pressure put on the children to conform to there's peer pressure to keep up with their friends. If you're not baptized by a certain age, people look down on you and talk about you in the kingdom hall, or they keep their kids away from you.
I think
How
that was the main reason why I felt the pressure was the other younger kids in the hall.
Yeah, yeah, you see them doing it, and you got to keep up, and if you don't, there's going to be consequences. So, and they'll even tell you from the platform that, they'll talk about the age of accountability, and how, once basically you can think and reason for yourself, if you don't get baptized, then Jehovah's gonna, hold you responsible anyway, so you might as well.
Right. Or
So
they would say like, "Oh, well, so and so's only an unbaptized publisher. Like he's just an unbaptized publisher.
right.
Like you have to be a part of a higher class or
Yeah,
something."
it's like he's almost human. you know, like you
Yeah,
have to.
exactly.
Yeah, like if once you get baptized, now you're a real person. And I just don't. I don't understand. I mean, I do understand. I can intellectualize it, but emotionally, it's very hard for me to understand how you can have a baby. It's one of the most exciting moments in a person's life. I can look back at pictures of my own mom and dad, holding me as a baby, and they were so excited that they got a little baby book, and they, stamp your feet and they put it in the baby book, or your fingerprint or whatever, all these things. And then you're excited for that baby's first steps, and you're excited for all the moments that you're going to have with that child. And then because that child does not take one path that you tried to set them on, you throw them away like garbage. It's
Me as a parent now, I cannot fathom that. I don't think there's anything any of my children could do later on that would justify, in my mind, me treating them the way I've been treated. There's
yeah,
there's there's no there's nothing.
it's just unfathomable. It really
No,
is.
it really is.
I think I mentioned it on my. I've mentioned it before somewhere in a podcast, but I remember there was this. So hopefully I'm not boring people, but there's a scripture in Proverbs. I think it is that in Jehovah's Witnesses, the New World Translation of the scriptures essentially says to train up a boy in the way in which he should walk, and he will not turn aside from it.
Yes.
And it sounds like, here's the way in which you should walk. I'm going to train you up to go down this prescribed path, and you're going to do that. But in other versions and other translations, it says to train up a boy in the way in which he is bent, and he will, I don't know, travel that path.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is it's in the way in which he is bent. Find out who that child is. When you have a child, you're curious as to who that child is going to be. What will they become? What will their personality be like?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, oh, look, here's a little mini me, a little robot, a little automaton. Let me program him and he will do this one thing. And if he doesn't, well, then, forget him. It's just,
Yeah.
it just doesn't, it's so inhuman. And it really,
because if that were true, then everybody in everybody's family would all be the exact same.
Right.
But they're not. So they're
Right.
obviously born with their own personality. And as much as you try to make a person be who you want them to be, or train a child into doing one specific thing, well, it's up to them whether they're going to do it or not. And yeah.
Whatever happened to the free will that Jehovah's Witnesses talk about Jehovah giving us? If he gave us free will and he lets us exercise it, then who are you to come between me and Jehovah and my free will to decide whether or not I'm good enough to even say hi to in a store?
Oh yes. Oh my gosh, too. I was going to mention this earlier, but I had one of the last times I had gone up to visit my parents, there was a man and his daughter whom I shared a hotel room with because my stepmom couldn't go with me to an assembly in southern Michigan. So I went with them, like just their family, and shared a hotel room with them. And I've known them since birth. Like my real mother was friends with this man's wife, and he saw me walking up the path to my parents' house, and he was walking out of my parents' house, and him and his daughter, who was like 12, literally looked the other way the whole time I walked past them, and then looked back. Like he put his hand up to like shade his face, and I'm thinking, I know you. You've known me my whole life. You and I have shared a hotel room together with your family, and you're gonna like pretend like looking at me is gonna burn your face. I was so angry. And I told my stepmom when I walked into the house, like, can you believe that he did that to me? And she's like, well, I think that they think they're not supposed to. And she, she's like, well, but that
excuses.
wasn't right. I'm going to tell your dad, and he's going to say something to him. And I'm thinking, what is he going to say to that guy that's going to change anything? Like, I don't care. I'm just irritated that he had to go so far as to block his face.
It's literally throwing shade.
Oh my gosh.
He literally threw shade at you.
Yes.
It's so childish, it's sad what the religion seems to devolve humans into. These petulant children who throw fits. It's just really sad.
Well, and what I was thinking the whole time too is, what did I do to you?
Nothing.
I did nothing to you. I am still that same person that you knew forever. What I did to leave, what I did to be disfellowshipped, had nothing to do with anybody else.
Nope.
other than I made that decision. And yeah, maybe I was disfellowshipped, but how does that really affect you personally
It
for
doesn't.
you to think you can treat me that way?
Well, and I mean that's one of the things that makes it culty, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so let's end this on a more positive note.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so you're you've got this new life, you're free. You've got was it's 3 kids, right?
Yes.
Yes, and they are adorable. I've seen them on Facebook.
Thank you.
Um so what do you enjoy about this new life that you've got so far? And then, what are your dreams for the future? What are your hopes?
Um, my favorite thing I think about being in this new life, not have, I mean, of course I'm affected by it. Otherwise I wouldn't be on your show, but
Right.
I just feel like I'm so happy that my kids don't have to deal with that. And I will take on anything to prevent them from going through something. And then to see them be as happy as they are, like with my husband's family or my mother or people in my mother's family, and creating bonds with those people. And just in the back of my mind, I feel like even if I'm not super close to that person, or I'm not best friends with, my husband's sister or something, my kids get to build relationships with these people, and it's their relationships, not mine. I have no say over it. I have no you can't see that person anymore because or we don't like them anymore because they get to choose whom they love, who they have a relationship with, and build off of that. And just more people who love my kids and want to be in their lives. um, that really brings a lot of joy to me.
Yeah.
And just having relationships with my own kids, because I don't see them as little mini me's or little mini Erics. Even my 6-month old has his own personality, and just seeing them grow. And it's weird because I never wanted kids. I mean, like, that was like the furthest thing on my to-do list, was to have kids. And then when I had them, I was just like, oh my gosh. And then when my husband didn't want to have more than two, I was a little upset. We ended up having three, and I was like, okay, we can, like, that's enough. Like, we can't necessarily afford to just keep having kids, Um, so, and I love him. Him and I are so different. We have a lot of things in common. We live very kind of separate lives, like I said, because I'm a stay-at-home mom and he's in the army, and then he's also has a civilian job. He works a lot. And I'm so grateful for that. But I think that because we live very separately, when we come together, it's really good. We have a really good time. We share a lot of family time. And he actually might go on a 9-month deployment next year, to Kuwait. And he came home and he's like, oh, I didn't want to make a decision without talking to you first. And I think a lot of times he doesn't realize how, like, in sync we are, because he's like, well, I just wanted to make sure, like, that if I did that, you wouldn't be mad at me. And I told him, I said, you signed up for the army. If they ask you to do something, you go do it, because that's what you signed up for. Like, I'm here to support you 100% in whatever you do. And he's like, okay, good. Cause like, he's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to do it for sure, but I just want to make sure that we were okay. I never really had a relationship like that with another person. So I guess I just am loving, our marriage and having our kids. And we live very simple. We have a small house, but I'm okay with that. I think being a Jehovah's Witness, they teach you to live very simple. And I kind of, I did like that about them, you know, to not be very materialistic.
Yeah.
And we do live very simply, but I think we find a lot more joy in things, not having to, um, I don't know. We just don't worry about a lot of other things that I feel like people with a lot of money can end up worrying about, I guess.
Oh yeah,
Never
everything's a
really is, I
trade-off.
don't know.
Yeah, there's so many trade-offs in life.
Yes.
And it's just all, what you enjoy. It sounds like you've kind of got everything you want, you know?
Yeah, I am happy. And I think that, you know, when talking to my stepmom and dad, they always say, well, I hope you're happy. And I'm like, well, I am. Thank you. You know, like I know you thought that it wouldn't be possible
Right.
or something, or maybe I didn't deserve to be happy, but I am. So thanks, you
Yeah.
know,
I
I
think
guess.
a lot of times some of those comments honestly are reflective of their own unhappiness.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I don't know. I can't speak for all of Jehovah's Witnesses. Um, I can just say that I was in enough congregations and pretty much everybody was depressed and unhappy. Um, though they claim to be differently when you really get down to talking to them, or many of them had to be medicated for depression and different things. Not, there's anything wrong with that, but when you claim to be the happiest people on earth, and everyone is kind of deeply unhappy at their core and searching, for this, using this religion as an escape.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's not happy or healthy. And then, here you are, you leave, and you actually find happiness, and what you thought you should have always had inside the organization is what, by and large, most of it, all the people that I've been talking to, they find on the outside of whatever that organization was. And it's
And it's not to say that, you know, bad things don't happen
sure.
to people on the outside. There's been a lot of things that have been like real messed up that I have gone through with you know, worldly people on the
Sure.
outside. In scary situations, but you know, it can happen to anybody and it goes both ways.
Right, that's the
So
thing. Right. Yeah, there's good and bad on both sides, and
yeah.
people are just people ultimately. And but it's a lot, I think it's a lot easier to find happiness in freedom, though there is more
Yes.
responsibility with it, than there is in captivity.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Well, is there anything that you wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to ask you, or that we skipped over?
Um, well, not really. I would like to put a shout out on there to a couple of people. You know, the girl Michelle that I talked about, she was disfellowshipped a couple years after me, and her and I reconnected and are friends again, and we're real
Oh,
friends, you know.
oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, she's a really cool person. I keep telling her she needs to listen to your show. I think it's really triggering for her though, because like I said, like a lot of her family is still in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Even her brother-in-law had become an elder and at a public event told her she needed to leave because she was making everyone uncomfortable in a public event. Like it was like um a festival, like an outdoor festival for the town, and he told her she needed to leave because she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I'm like, "Girl, you've got to find an outlet." Because I think she struggles with stuff sometimes too. Um,
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a big thing for a lot of us is taking our power back.
yes. Yep. So, but
Well, good
yeah,
for her. Shout out to Michelle for getting out,
sure.
being free.
There's a couple of young people that were in the Kingdom Hall that that I had later found out had left. I'm not necessarily real good friends with them after the fact because we didn't really have a lot in common in it, other than we were in it in the
Yeah,
same age, kind of.
right.
thing. But it kind of gives me hope for them, because when you're in it for a long time and you're an adult and you leave, it sucks because you feel like, oh, I wasted a lot of my life. But at the same time, what could I have done differently for, my kids or my grandkids or whatever? And these young people that are leaving, I feel like it warms my heart a little bit because I feel like they have a chance to make their generation and the next generation different.
That's beautiful. I am always encouraged when I see young people come out. Um, I
Yeah.
I I'm a member of a forum, and I see people come onto the forum who are like 12, 13 years old, who can already see that it's bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, I wish at 12 or 13 I could have seen that and not wasted decades of my life in that.
And isn't it funny how I just feel like, the Jehovah's Witnesses, oh, when there's world peace, then the end's coming. And I'm thinking, man, if they had only known that technology was going to make it so that people wouldn't join their cult in the end, how could they have not predicted that if they're the true religion, that it was going to be the internet that was going to be the downfall of
Well,
them?
there are some
Oh,
people right now who are tripping because North Korea and South Korea um, are having peaceful relations or
yeah,
whatever, and so Jehovah's Witnesses believe that when there's going to be this cry of peace and security, that the end is going to come. And the funny thing is about that cry of peace and security is that originally, or at one point, they thought that it was going to be that basically the world was going to be in such a bad state of affairs that people would be crying out for peace and security because they were hoping to have it, and then Armageddon would come and Jehovah would usher in this new system of peace and security. And
right,
then they kind of backpedaled and said, well, we don't know. Maybe it'll be a time where it appears that mankind is on the brink of peace and security. And it's like,
right,
well, you can't play it both ways.
right.
Like, in other words, so when North and South Korea looked like they were going to be at war just a year ago, Jehovah's Witnesses said, oh, look, things are getting tense over there. The end's going to come. Now things are going better over there. And it's like, oh, peace and security. Here comes the
Right.
end. Like,
They'll cry wolf either way.
right. It's always coming tomorrow. It's been coming tomorrow for over a century.
Yes.
And even before that, 1914, if we're going to start the beginning of that century, they thought that's when the end was coming. So
Well, and you would think so too with all the world wars at that time,
right. Right. They've constantly changed, and
Ugh. Yeah.
yeah, it just doesn't fit. But anyway, was there anyone else that you wanted to shout out?
No, just that Michelle and I, we're friends again. Like I said, I'm not super close to anybody else on there, and I've made some really, really good friends now here in Indianapolis that they'll say so they'll sit there and they'll like suffer through listening to my stories, and I appreciate that. I really feel like I found a couple of really, really good friends here now in Indianapolis, so I don't feel as lonely. It's one thing to have a significant other, but they can't always fill every role for you. You
True.
kind of have to have other friends too, and
Yep.
for a long time I didn't, but now I feel like I do. So
We'll come out to a pasta fest in August and make some more friends.
heck yeah, I'm going to.
It'll be fun. There's quite a few people there last year, so
You'll have to send me the invite.
what's that?
I said you'll have to send me the invite so I can go because
Oh,
I would
you
love
oh,
to.
you're not. I didn't know if you knew the people or whatever. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely send that
I,
to you.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I'll forward that to you. We'll make a note to do that. Yeah, I'll do that. I mean, they invite hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, not everyone can come, and they're inviting people from a large geographical area. Um,
Right.
I think last year there was like maybe 30 people or something like that. But yeah, I'll send you the invitation. As always, I want to thank Sydney for being so open about her life. And I'm really glad that she's free and her kids never have to grow up in a cult. My wife and I look forward, hopefully, to going up where she lives and hanging out again sometime. Now, I mentioned at the end there and in the intro that there was an Apostafest. Fest. So, the weekend of September the 8th and 9th, I'm going to release an episode comprised of a bunch of mini interviews that I did while I was at that Apostafest. Fest. They were originally going to be a bonus at the end of this episode, but there's enough good stuff there that I'm just going to go ahead and make it an episode of its own. Through it, you're going to get to meet a bunch of people, get to know their lives a little bit, get some idea of who might be in an Apostafest if you ever have the opportunity to attend one sometime. All right, now for the big announcement. I started a Facebook group. Now, I know there's a ton of ex-Jehovah's Witness Facebook groups, but this one is for fans and guests of the podcast. I don't want it just to be the typical ex-JW group where people keep up with the latest happenings in the cult. I want this to be for anyone that listens to the show and left any cult or religion. I guess you don't even technically have to be a listener, but I don't know how you're going to find out about it otherwise. But my goal is to make this a fun and supportive group. It's about, things that these stories are about, people's lives, their feelings, what they want out of life, trying to find that after leaving a cult, things like that. So I've already started one thread where people who were guests of the show can raise their hand and you can meet them. There's another thread where you can introduce yourself and write some of your own story to meet and to share with others. And then on the weekend, my plan is to do what I'm calling an SCS thread, or Self-Care Saturday or Sunday, where people can share something that they're doing over the weekend for themselves. It's not easy when you leave a cult to learn self-care. Our whole lives typically revolved around the whims, really, of whatever cult or group we were in. So, maybe if you still struggle with self-care, maybe you'll see what some other people are doing for themselves and get some ideas for yourself. So my point is that the goal is to make this a support group for all of us. The goal of this podcast isn't just to focus on former Jehovah's Witnesses. My goal is to help us all see that across these different cults or groups, we aren't alone, not only within our group, but even outside our group. We're not alone. There are other people in this world that are going through or have gone through the same types of things. So we can all learn from one another, whether we left the Witnesses, the FLDS, the Mennonites, or any other group. The name of the group is Shunned Podcast, 2 words, and it's a closed group, so you'll have to sign up and get approved to join. By making it closed, only members can see who's in it. Now, with that said, I can't control who gets in and verify who every person is. I can, however, kick out troublemakers with the quickness, and if you're super worried about being discovered, my suggestion would be to maybe create an account with a pseudonym and join that way. So come find us on Facebook at the group called Shunned Podcast, and let's do something good. I've already got several of the guests that have been on the show in there, some listeners that saw my post on Facebook about it, and it's already fun, to be honest, so the more the merrier. Speaking of doing good, between this podcast and this JW Life, where I told my story, we now have over 40,000 total individual downloads. I never would have believed when I started this JW Life that it would have grown like this. There are still people to this day that find and start episode 1 of this JW Life, listen through that, go through the whole this JW Life episode list, and then come join us on Shunned. I get really cool emails from people that have been helped to wake up by the podcast. People that are out, but now know that they aren't alone, that they aren't bad in some way, and people that now understand that, Jada, relative or friend. And honestly, some of these other groups, the Mennonites, FLDS, whatever, It's people understanding, what somebody else in another group went through, and by doing so, they understand better what they went through themselves. I want to go ahead and take a moment and personally thank Sarah, Kristen, David, and Lindy for signing up at patreon.com/shunned to help support the show financially. They signed up just in the month of August. You can do so for as little as $1, and it really helps. Right now I'm in the middle of doing extra episodes, and with extra episodes comes extra costs. If I get these other ones transcribed, that costs money as well as it takes more time. So again, that's patreon.com/shunned if you're interested in helping to support the show. I'm actually kicking around some ideas. I'll probably start a thread in the Facebook group, once we get a good sampling of people in there. I have so many people that are reaching out to me that want to tell their stories. At the present rate of one episode per month, I really can't keep up with demand. So I'm considering going to maybe 2 a month, and I'm kind of trying it right now, as you can see here in August and September. But there's a limit to what I can do and work like I need to make ends meet, or at least like I do in our cleaning business. If I could do something like this and help people and take some pressure off cleaning financially, I could spend more time doing this. We're looking at options ourselves as far as cutting down some cleaning, because frankly, we're running ourselves into the ground anyway, just in that part of our life. So, hey, there you go. There's part of self-care, right? Don't run yourself into the ground in whatever business you have. I know that, this podcast helps people. I know that not only listeners are helped, but people who get to tell their stories, it helps to process your own stuff, to kind of sit it down and maybe be able to walk away from it a little bit, to get some perspective on it, if nothing else. And I want to help as many tell their stories as possible. But the reality is that there's only so many hours in a day and so much energy I can give mentally and emotionally to the interviews and production. This past month, I tried to do an interview every weekend, and I enjoyed doing it, but it does, take something from you mentally and emotionally to frankly, just to interview anyone. But, some of our stories are pretty harsh, and, I'm not immune to the impacts of listening to these stories and digging them out and bringing them out. So, I'd like to be able to do more. And I'm working on that as a potential option. Again, I'll post in the Facebook group, Shunned Podcast, and we'll kind of have a discussion about it and what people want. I don't know if my listeners are interested in more content, or if what I'm doing right now is enough or more than enough for people to try to keep up with. I want to know what you want, and try to. I want to do all these myself. So don't think you're saving me from myself by saying, one a month is good enough for me and I can barely keep up as it is. If that's true, that's fine. But if you would like more of these, let me know. And it is my desire to help everybody. But at the same time, obviously, I realize that I can't. So anyway, trying to strike that balance there is what I'm looking for. And so I'm open to input there. If you'd like to leave a comment for Sydney, you can do so at shunnedpodcast.com on the episodes page. And in the new Facebook group, I think I'm going to put a post up every time I release an episode. And you can also leave comments there of support or questions or whatever for the people who did the podcast. And then if they're a member of the group, they can actually respond to you there. You can also support the show by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. There's a link right in the description that is probably available on your app where you can do so. You can get all the information you need in the description on my site or from your podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube as Shunned Podcast, one word. I even just put out a new in-person video, a vidcast on YouTube that you might like. The song that Sydney chose to represent her journey is Playing God by Paramore. And there's a link in the description to the song if you'd like to listen or watch the video. It's my bad. I've been neglecting to mention people's songs, trying to remember what all to put in the intros and outros of these episodes. So you can go to shunnedpodcast.com and see the songs chosen by each participant. The music for the podcast is by Fair Voyeur, entitled No Hell Yet. And until next week, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
Curse God